Hey, welcome back to TK's Tech Corner, where we look at all things techie for the average user. So the Logitech Mevo Start live streamer camera has been a simple, quick, and pretty affordable solution to getting into multi-camera live streaming. But it hasn't been without its pitfalls. One of the caveats that I've had with this system is that the image quality isn't that great when it's in auto mode. The image just seems too dark and soft, and sometimes washed out. To try to fix this issue, I would manually have to adjust the image settings in manual mode to get a somewhat decent result. But Logitech has just released a new firmware upgrade to address this very issue, making it easier for not so camera settings savvy users to get a great looking picture right out of the box. So let's take a look at the image difference between the old firmware and the new firmware. So to test this, I have two Mevo Start set up. One camera is running the old firmware and the other camera is running the new firmware. The old firmware is 3.028B, and this firmware version is actually maybe 2 versions older than the new firmware. The new firmware is 3.0.32B. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to locally record the footage to my iPad using the Mevo multicam app, and I'll flip back and forth between both cameras so you can see the difference. So right here we have the Mevo multicam app running, and I'm just going to hit start recording. So now we are recording locally to the iPad. And now what you're seeing now is the firmware, the camera with the old firmware version running right now. So as you can see, the image looks kind of dark. It is very dark in the shadows from what I can see, and also you can see that it may be a little bit washed out. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna flip to the camera that's running the new firmware, and what you're going to notice right away is that the image is much brighter. The shadows aren't so dark. You can actually see kind of the detail in the shadows. And that's one of the things that I also have noticed with the new firmware upgrade, is that there's a sharpness increase. And we'll get back into it, but I'll show you guys in the settings that there is a new setting in the image quality settings part of it that allows you to adjust the sharpness of the cameras. So what we'll look at here, we see we are back to the old camera, the old firmware. As we can see that it's pretty muddy and dark from the newer firmware upgrade. Now the only difference, I'll flip back to the new firmware. Now what you'll see now is the only difference between the old firmware and the new firmware when it comes to the color is that you lose some of your color saturation with the new firmware, but it does help with the skin tone. I'm a more of a darker complected person, and I've noticed that the skin tone is rendered much better with the new firmware than with the old. So now I'm going to show you guys in the settings here. So now we're back in the Mevo multicam app, and we're going to click here on the camera that's running the old firmware. If we click there and click on image adjustments, we see that we are in normal mode. Everything, camera mode is set to auto. Everything is basically set automatically by the camera itself. It's basically looking at the scene and adjusting exposure, pretty much everything that you see. Now this is the old firmware. Now we're going to go into the adjustment layer for the new firmware. So it's pretty much everything is the same when it comes to your available settings. But if you notice right here, you will see that it has sharpness. And if you click there, you can adjust your sharpness of the image. Right now it's set on medium. So I haven't tried this yet, but let's set the sharpness on high and let's see what that image looks like. So I just set it to high. I'm going to click off, click back, and okay, that camera is selected. So right now you're looking at the Mevo Start running the new firmware with the sharpness adjusted to high. This is my first time doing it, so I'm not sure how the image looks. You guys let me know in the comments what you guys think of the sharpness adjustment being set at high. And we're going to go back into it and we're going to look at it and adjust it to low and see how that is. All right, so the image quality, the image sharpness is set to low now. So tell me if you can see any difference in it, yay or nay. But this is what we have right now. All right. So all in all, I'm well pleased with the new firmware upgrade that Logitech has released for the Mevo Start. I think it'll work very well with the mixed system that I run. I usually run for my main camera a Canon RP. It's a mirrorless camera, and I usually run that as my main shot, and I use my Mevo Starts as second and third shots for, you know, either a crowd view or a close-up on a tight shot on an individual, with me being able to have the cameras very close to them. So I can just say that I'm pleased with what Logitech has done with the new firmware upgrade. This is definitely an improvement from the original image quality that the cameras have had in the past with the old firmware. So that wraps it up for me today. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you later.